The sterile scent of antiseptic filled the dimly lit hospital room where a man lay motionless on the hospital bed. His name was Officer Daniel Hayes. A decorated K-9 officer known for his bravery and dedication. Machines beeped in rhythmic tones, monitoring his fragile state. The doctors had told his family and colleagues that he had only a few hours left outside the room. A German shepherd named Shadow paced anxiously. Shadow was more than just a police dog. He was Daniel's loyal partner, his protector, his best friend for years. They had worked together taking down criminals, rescuing the lost, and building an unbreakable bond. But now everything was changing. Shadow whimpered as he watched the hospital staff come and go. He didn't understand why Daniel wouldn't wake up, why he couldn't nudge him and make him stand like he always did. After a long night on patrol, the other officers had brought Shadow here to say goodbye. But something in his instincts told him that goodbye wasn't the right word. A nurse walked past him, pausing to kneel down and gently scratch behind his ears. "Poor boy," she whispered, "he's been waiting all night, inside the room." Daniel's family sat in silence, their faces pale from exhaustion and grief. His sister Emily held his cold hand, whispering words of love and memories of their childhood. His father, a retired officer himself, sat with his head bowed, his strong hands clenched into fists. The doctor, a tall man with silver-rimmed glasses, approached the family with a solemn expression. "It's time," he said softly. "We will be disconnecting the life support." The words sent a shiver through the room. Emily gasped, shaking her head in protest, while Daniel's father closed his eyes, fighting back tears. The officers standing in the doorway looked down, their badges reflecting the fluorescent light. "Can Shadow say goodbye first?" One of the officers asked the doctor, hesitated before nodding. Of course, the door opened, and Shadow rushed in his claws, clicking against the cold tiles. His eyes locked onto Daniel, his ears perked up, and his nose twitched as he sniffed the air. Something was wrong. Shadow jumped onto the bed, ignoring the gentle protests from the nurses. He nuzzled. Daniel's face licked his hand and whimpered desperately. His tail, usually high with confidence, was tucked between his legs. He was pawing at Daniel's chest as if urging him to wake up. Then suddenly Shadow froze, his ears twitched and his body stiffened. He sniffed Daniel's breath, then moved his nose to his neck, inhaling deeply. Something was off. Shadow growled low in his throat, his fur bristling. "What's wrong, boy?" one of the officers asked. Shadow turned his head sharply toward the doctor, his deep brown eyes locking onto the man's face. He growled again, this time louder. The sound sent a chill through the room. The doctor stepped back, looking surprised. "What's the matter with him?" But Shadow wasn't backing down his instincts. Home from years of police work screamed at him that something wasn't right. He barked loudly, his body positioned protectively over Daniel. "Shadow, calm down," Emily said, trying to soothe him, but Shadow wouldn't calm down. His nose twitched again and he let out another bark, his eyes flicking from Daniel to the doctor. One of the officers, a man named Sergeant Carter, stepped forward. "Hold on," he said. Glancing at the machines, "Is Daniel—" "Really?" He hesitated, then turned to the nurse. "Check his vitals again." The nurse looked uncertain, but did as she was told. She pressed the stethoscope to Daniel's chest and suddenly gasped. "He's breathing on his own," she whispered. The room fell silent. "What?" The doctor frowned, stepping forward, but Shadow growled again. Standing between him and Daniel, Sergeant Carter's eyes narrowed. "Check again." The nurse quickly adjusted the monitors. "His heart rate is stabilizing." Emily let out a small cry. "He's alive." "He shouldn't be," the doctor muttered, his face turning pale. But Shadow wasn't done yet. He sniffed the 4 bag attached to Daniel's arm and let out another warning growl. He paid at it, then barked loudly. Sergeant Carter stepped closer and examined the 4. His face darkened. "What's in this bag?" he demanded. The nurse looked at the label and gasped. "This isn't his medication." The air in the room turned ice cold. Sergeant Carter turned sharply to the doctor. "Explain this." The doctor opened his mouth but hesitated. Sweat beaded on his forehead. It must have been a mix-up, but Shadow wasn't convinced. He barked again, louder this time, his teeth. Bead Sergeant Carter grabbed the 4-bag and handed it to another officer. Get this tested. Now within minutes, the results confirmed what Shadow had suspected. Daniel had been given the wrong medication, a fatal dose of a drug that would have shut down his system completely. It wasn't a mistake, it was attempted murder. The doctor tried to slip out of the room, but Shadow lunged, blocking his path. He barked ferociously, his instinct screaming that this man was a threat. The officers acted fast. Grabbing the doctor before he could flee, "You have the right to remain silent," Sergeant Carter said coldly as he handcuffed him, "and I strongly suggest you use it." The doctor's face twisted in fear as he was led away. Shadow, satisfied that the threat was gone, turned back to Daniel. He licked his face gently, his tail wagging just slightly. Daniel's eyes fluttered open. The room erupted into gasps. Emily sobbed with relief. His father let out a shaky breath. The officers murmured in disbelief. Daniel, weak but alive, reached out and placed his hand on Shadow's head. "Good boy," he whispered. Shadow let out a soft whimper and rested his head on Daniel's chest. Listening to the heartbeat he had just saved, he had come to save goodbye. Instead, he saved his best friend's life. Morale of the story: loyalty and instinct should never be underestimated. True friends, whether human or animal, have a way of sensing danger even when others don't trust love. And the unbreakable bond between a dog and its owner can sometimes be the difference between life and death.